The phone rang just after 2 in the afternoon, right in the middle of an oil change. David Martinez wiped his greasy hands on his work pants and grabbed his cell phone from the toolbox. The number wasn't saved in his contacts, but it had a local area code, so he answered. "Is this David Martinez?" A woman's voice asked, professional but urgent. "Yeah, that's me." "Who's calling?" "Mr. Martinez, this is Linda Cooper from Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about Eleanor Chen. She's listed you as her emergency contact." David's mind went blank for a moment. Eleanor Chen. That name hit him like a punch to the chest. He hadn't heard it in 40 years. Hadn't thought about her in, well, maybe he had thought about her more than he wanted to admit. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake," David said, leaning against the car he'd been working on. "I knew Eleanor a long time ago, but we're not family or anything." "Mr. Martinez, you're the only person listed in her file. She's in critical condition and we need authorization for emergency surgery. Can you come to the hospital?" David's hand was shaking. Critical condition. Eleanor. The Eleanor he remembered was strong, sharp, always in control. But that was decades ago. She'd be old now, really old. "What happened to her?" he asked. "I can't discuss details over the phone, but time is very important here. How soon can you get here?" David looked around his shop. A customer's car was up on the lift, his tools scattered everywhere, but something in the woman's voice told him this couldn't wait. "Give me 20 minutes, he said. He hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. His employee, Tommy, walked over with a confused look. "Boss, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maybe he had. A ghost from 1984, from a life he'd almost forgotten he'd lived. "I gotta go," David said. "Family emergency."
"Can you close up today?"
Tommy nodded, and David grabbed his jacket and keys. As he drove toward the hospital, his mind drifted back, way back, to when he was 19 years old and had absolutely nothing. That was 1984. David had dropped out of community college after one semester because he couldn't afford the books. His father had kicked him out of the house after one too many arguments about David's future, or lack of one. He'd been sleeping in his beat-up Ford Pinto in different parking lots around town, trying to stay one step ahead of the cops who'd tell him to move along. He'd gotten a job washing dishes at Betty's Diner on Route 9. The pay was minimum wage. The work was hot and miserable, but it kept him fed. He'd eat the leftover food at the end of his shift, stuff his pockets with dinner rolls, and save every penny he could. Eleanor Chen had been a regular at the diner. She came in every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, always ordered the same thing: chicken soup and a grilled cheese sandwich, coffee with 2 creams. She'd sit in the corner booth with a book, reading and eating slowly, like she had all the time in the world. David had noticed her because she was one of the few customers who actually looked at him. Most people treated dishwashers like they were invisible. But Eleanor would catch his eye through the serving window and nod, like she was acknowledging he existed. It was a small thing, but when you're living in your car and feeling like garbage, small things matter a lot. One day in October, he'd started bussing tables too because the regular waiter called in sick. When he cleared Eleanor's table, he found a $5 bill under her plate. The meal cost $3.50. He'd run after her into the parking lot. "Ma'am, you left too much money." She'd turned around, this tiny Asian woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun, wearing a neat cardigan despite the warm weather. She had these sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through him. "That's your tip, young man, but that's too much. That's almost what the meal cost." "Then I suggest you keep it," she'd said with a slight smile. "You look like you could use it." That had been the start. Every time she came in after that, she'd leave him a big tip. Not just $1 or $2, but $5, sometimes $10. And there was always a note, written on napkins in neat handwriting. Simple things like "keep going" or "better days ahead" or "you matter." David had kept every single one of those napkins in a shoebox in his car. They'd become like fuel, little reminders that someone out there saw him as a human being. After a few weeks, Eleanor started staying later at the diner. She'd finish her meal and order another coffee, and she'd talk to him during his breaks. She never asked nosy questions about why a kid his age was working as a dishwasher. She just talked to him like a regular person. She told him about her life. She'd been a high school English teacher for 30 years before retiring. Her husband had been an engineer, died about 5 years back. They'd never had children, which she said with a sad smile that told David there was a story there she didn't want to share. David found himself opening up to her about his dad, about dropping out of school, about his dream of becoming an engineer himself someday. Eleanor listened without judgment. She didn't give him lectures about wasting his potential or making bad choices. She just listened. Then came that night in November. David remembered it perfectly even now, 40 years later. It had started raining around 10 at night. A cold, nasty rain that turned into sleet. He'd been planning to park behind the old grocery store that night, but when he got there was a cop car already waiting. The officer had told him to move along, threatened to ticket him for loitering. David had driven around for an hour, trying to find somewhere to park where he wouldn't get hassled. He'd ended up back at the diner parking lot because he figured it was the last place anyone would look. He'd parked in the far corner, away from the lights, and tried to sleep while the sleet hammered on the car roof. Around midnight, someone had knocked on his window. David had nearly jumped out of his skin. It was Eleanor, standing in the sleet with an umbrella, wearing a raincoat over her nightgown. "Get out of that car right now," she'd said, not angry but firm. "Ma'am, I'm fine. I was just David Martinez. I'm not stupid and I'm not blind. I've known you were sleeping in this car for weeks. Now get out and follow me." She'd driven a sensible Toyota, and he'd followed her in his Pinto to a small house about 10 minutes away. A neat little place with a flower garden in front, even though everything was dead from the cold. Inside, she'd pointed to a bedroom at the end of the hall. "That's the guest room. It has clean sheets and a space heater. The bathroom is next door. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself to whatever you need." David had stood in her living room, dripping water on her carpet, completely overwhelmed. "I can't. I mean, you don't even know me." "I know enough," Eleanor had said. "I know you work hard. I know you're honest. I know you're in a tough spot. That's all I need to know. How long can I stay?" "As long as you need." Those 4 words had changed his life. David had lived in Eleanor's guest room for almost 2 years. She'd never charged him rent, never made him feel like a burden. She'd just let him be. Let him work, save money, figure out his life. She'd packed him lunches for work. She'd helped him study for his GED. When he'd passed it, she'd actually cried tears of joy. She'd encouraged him to apply to the community college again, and when he'd gotten accepted, she'd written him a check for his first semester tuition. "Pay it forward someday," she'd said. "That's all I ask." By 1986, David had a good job as an apprentice mechanic at a real repair shop. He'd met Maria at a friend's barbecue. He'd saved enough money to rent an apartment. He'd been ready to stand on his own feet. The day he'd moved out, Eleanor had hugged him tight. "I'm so proud of you," she'd whispered. "Go live your life," and he had. He'd thrown himself into work, into building a life with Maria. They'd gotten married in 1988. He'd eventually opened his own auto shop. They'd had their daughter Sophia in 1993. Life had been good, busy, full. He'd meant to visit Eleanor. He really had. But weeks turned into months, months turned into years. He'd driven past her street a few times, always meaning to stop. But he'd been too busy or too tired or too embarrassed that he'd waited so long. He'd convinced himself that she'd moved on, that she didn't need some guy she'd helped decades ago showing up and bothering her. Now, pulling into the Mercy General parking lot, David felt sick with guilt. 40 years of silence. What kind of person does that? She'd saved his life, given him a home when he had nothing, and he'd repaid her by disappearing. He found the main entrance and went to the information desk. The volunteer there directed him to the cardiac unit on the 4th floor. His heart was pounding as he rode the elevator up. What was he going to say to her? How could he possibly explain where he'd been for 4 decades? At the nurse's station, he gave his name. A doctor in scrubs, looking exhausted, came over to talk to him. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Dr. Patel. Thank you for coming so quickly. Mrs. Chen is in serious condition. She had a massive heart attack this morning. We need to perform emergency surgery, but given her age, it's high risk. We need family consent to proceed." "How old is she?" David asked, though he could do the math himself. 107. David felt the floor shift under his feet. 107. Eleanor, who'd been old in his mind at 67, had lived another 40 years. Had been alive this whole time, and he'd never once checked on her. "Doctor, I should tell you I'm not actually family. I'm just someone she knew a long time ago. There has to be someone else." Dr. Patel shook his head. "We've checked every database we have access to. No children, no siblings, no living relatives that we can find. You're the only person listed in her emergency contacts. She updated her file 6 months ago and specifically added your name. 6 months ago. Eleanor had been thinking about him 6 months ago after 40 years of silence. David's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. "Can I see her before you decide anything?" Dr. Patel nodded and led him down the hallway to a room. He paused at the door. "I should warn you, she's very weak. She drifts in and out of consciousness. Don't be alarmed by all the equipment." David stepped into the room. The beeping of monitors filled the space. And there, tiny and fragile in the hospital bed, was Eleanor. She looked so small now, so old. Her hair was completely white, her face lined with a century of living. But when David approached the bed and she opened her eyes, he recognized them immediately. Those sharp, intelligent eyes that had seen him when no one else had. "David," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He grabbed her hand. And despite everything, despite the tubes and wires and machines, he felt her squeeze back, strong, still strong. "I'm here," he managed to say. "I'm here, Eleanor." She smiled just a little. "I knew you would come," she said. "I always knew." And that's when David broke. 40 years of guilt, of shame, of unanswered questions came pouring out. He bent his head down to their joined hands and cried like he hadn't cried since he was that scared 19-year-old kid sleeping in his car. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry I never came back. I'm so sorry I disappeared. You saved my life and I just left and never even called, and I'm so sorry." Eleanor's other hand, the one without the IV, reached up and touched his head. "Hush now," she said softly. "You have nothing to apologize for. You lived your life. That's what I wanted. That's all I ever wanted." Dr. Patel cleared his throat from the doorway. "Mr. Martinez, I need to know. Do we have your authorization for the surgery?" David looked at Eleanor. Her eyes were clear, present. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay to let me go. I've had such a wonderful life. I'm not afraid, but David couldn't do that. Couldn't let her go, not now. Not when he just found her again after all these years. Do the surgery," he said to Dr. Patel. "Do whatever it takes. Save her." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears and she squeezed his hand again. Dr. Patel nodded and left to prepare for the operation. David pulled a chair close to the bed and held Eleanor's hand. "I'm not leaving," he said. "Not this time. Never again." "Tell me about your life," Eleanor whispered. "Tell me everything," so he did. He told her about Maria, about Sophia, about his shop, about the life he'd built on the foundation she'd given him. And Eleanor listened, just like she'd always listened, with those sharp eyes full of warmth and understanding. When they came to take her to surgery an hour later, Eleanor looked at him one more time. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for remembering me," David replied. As they wheeled her away, David stood in the hallway, watching until she disappeared around a corner. Then he pulled out his phone and called Maria. "Hey, honey," he said when she answered. "I need you to come to Mercy General. There's someone I want you to meet, someone I should have brought you to meet 40 years ago." Maria arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later, her face full of concern. She found David in the surgical waiting room, staring at the wall with red-rimmed eyes. She sat down next to him and took his hand without saying anything. That's what he loved about her. She knew when to just be there. After a few minutes, David started talking. He told her everything. About sleeping in his car at 19. About Eleanor finding him in that parking lot on a freezing night. About living in her guest room for 2 years while he got his life together. About how she'd paid for his education and never asked for anything back. "Why didn't you ever tell me about her?" Maria asked softly, not accusing, just curious. David shook his head. "I don't know. Shame, maybe. By the time I met you, I'd built this new life. I didn't want you to know I'd been that broken kid living in his car. And then time kept passing and it felt too late to bring it up. Too late to go back and face her after I'd abandoned her. You didn't abandon her, David. You were young. You were building a life. I should have visited. I should have called. She gave me everything and I gave her nothing back." Maria squeezed his hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." They sat together in silence for a while. Other families came and went from the waiting room. Some got good news, some got bad news. David watched them all and prayed Eleanor would be one of the lucky ones. Around 7 that evening, Dr. Patel came through the doors in fresh scrubs. David jumped to his feet. The doctor's face was tired but not sad, which David took as a good sign. "The surgery went well," Dr. Patel said. "Better than we expected, honestly. Her heart is stronger than it should be for someone her age. But I need to be clear with you. The next 48 hours are critical. Her body has been through major trauma. There could be complications. We're monitoring her closely. Can I see her? She's in recovery now. Give us about an hour to get her settled in ICU. Then you can sit with her. But Mr. Martinez, she needs rest. Keep your visit short tonight. David nodded, relief flooding through him. She'd made it through the surgery. That was something. That was hope. While they waited for Eleanor to be moved to ICU, a woman in business casual clothes approached them. She introduced herself as Patricia Holmes, a hospital social worker. Mr. Martinez, I wanted to talk to you about Mrs. Chen's situation. We've been trying to locate family members or friends, but we're not having much luck. Do you know if she has anyone else in her life? David felt that guilt twist in his stomach again. I honestly don't know. I haven't seen her in 40 years. Patricia's eyebrows went up. 40 years? But you're her emergency contact, I know. I don't understand that either. Patricia pulled out a tablet and showed him Eleanor's patient file. She updated this information 6 months ago. Added your name, your phone number, even your business address. She also left some personal belongings with us when she was admitted this morning. The paramedics brought them from her apartment. I was hoping you might want to look through them. See if there's information about other people we should contact. She handed David a medium-sized cardboard box. Inside were the basics you'd expect. Eleanor's purse, her wallet, her keys, her phone. But underneath those items was something that made David's breath catch. A scrapbook. Old and worn, the cover faded blue fabric. He opened it carefully. The first page had a newspaper clipping from 1988, his wedding announcement. The photo was small and grainy, but there he was with Maria, both of them young and happy. Below it, Eleanor had written in her neat handwriting, David married Maria Torres today. I am so happy for him. David's hand started shaking. He turned the page. Another clipping, this one from 1993. A birth announcement. David and Maria Martinez welcome daughter Sophia Rose. Eleanor's note, a baby girl. How wonderful. He will be a good father. Page after page of his life. An article from the local paper when his auto shop opened in 1999. His name listed among community volunteers who'd helped rebuild the park playground in 2005. A photo from the Chamber of Commerce website when he'd won Small Business Owner of the Year in 2012. Every major event in his life, documented and preserved. Maria looked over his shoulder, her eyes wide. David, she's been following your life this whole time. He couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was seeing. 40 years of his life, carefully clipped and saved by a woman he'd thought had forgotten about him. There's more, Patricia said gently, reaching into the box. She pulled out a stack of envelopes, maybe 30 or 40 of them, held together with a rubber band. They were all addressed to David Martinez at various addresses he'd lived at over the years, but none of them had been mailed. No stamps, no postmarks. David pulled out the first letter. The date at the top said November 1986, right after he'd moved out of Eleanor's house. Dear David, it began. I hope you're settling into your new apartment well. I hope Maria is lovely and makes you happy. I wanted to write and tell you how proud I am of you, but I worried that a letter might make you feel obligated to write back. You don't owe me anything. You never did. Watching you grow and succeed has been the greatest gift of my retirement. I hope life brings you everything you deserve. With love, Eleanor. David's vision blurred with tears. He pulled out another letter, this one from 1993. Dear David, I saw the announcement about your daughter's birth in the paper. Sophia Rose, what a beautiful name. I cried when I read it, happy tears. You're going to be such a good father, better than your own father was to you. I know this in my heart. I wanted to send a gift, but I didn't want to intrude on your new life. Just know that I'm thinking of you and wishing you all the best. With love, Eleanor. Letter after letter spanning 40 years. Updates about her own life. Expressions of pride in his accomplishments, explanations for why she never reached out. One letter from 2001 particularly struck him. Dear David, I drove past your auto shop today. I didn't stop, didn't go in. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. It looks wonderful. You've built something real, something lasting. I remember that scared boy who slept in his car, who thought he'd never amount to anything. If only he could see himself now. I wanted to walk in and tell you how proud I am. But you don't need an old woman from your past showing up and making things complicated. You needed to fly, David. You needed to soar without looking back. And you have. That's all I ever wanted for you. With love, Eleanor. David put his face in his hands and sobbed. Maria wrapped her arms around him, and Patricia quietly excused herself to give them privacy. She never forgot me, David choked out between sobs. I thought I'd disappeared from her life, but she was there the whole time. Watching, caring, staying away because she thought that's what I needed. She loved you, Maria said softly. She still loves you. That's why you're her emergency contact. You're family to her, David. You always have been. David wiped his eyes and kept reading through the letters. In one from 2015, Eleanor mentioned her volunteer work at the Gateway House, a homeless shelter downtown. She wrote about helping a young veteran named Tyler find housing and a job, about a teenage runaway named Keisha, who reminded her of herself at that age, about an older man named Robert who'd lost everything in a medical bankruptcy. I think of you often when I work at the shelter, the letter said. I see you in every face. Every person has a story, has potential, has worth. Just like you did. Just like you do. I've helped many people over the years, David. Some stay in touch, some don't. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they're out there living their lives, being happy. That's the reward. That's always been the reward. David realized something then. He wasn't special. Or rather, he was special, but not unique. Eleanor had made a life out of saving people. She'd taken her grief, her loss, whatever had driven her to help a random dishwasher in 1984. And she'd turned it into a mission. How many people were out there right now, living good lives because Eleanor Chen had shown up when they needed her most? He asked Patricia about it when she came back. The letters mention a place called Gateway House. She volunteered there. Do you know anything about that? Patricia nodded. Oh yes, Gateway House is a well-known shelter. Mrs. Chen volunteered there for over 30 years. She only stopped last year when her health started declining. They actually called here earlier asking about her. They're very concerned. Are there other people? Other people she helped? I don't know specifically, but I can reach out to Gateway House, see if they have any information. An hour later, David and Maria were allowed into the ICU. Eleanor was in the first room, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed. She looked even smaller than before, more fragile, but her chest was rising and falling steadily, and when David took her hand, her fingers twitched slightly. Eleanor, it's David. I'm here. You made it through the surgery. You're going to be okay. Her eyes didn't open, but he thought maybe she could hear him. He hoped she could. I found the scrapbook, he continued, his voice breaking. And the letters. All those letters you never sent. Eleanor, why didn't you ever reach out? I would have come. I would have been there. Of course she couldn't answer. She was too deep in medicated sleep. But David kept talking anyway. I was so stupid. I convinced myself you'd moved on. That you didn't need some guy you'd helped decades ago bothering you. But that wasn't it at all, was it? You stayed away because you thought I needed space. You thought you'd be a burden. God, Eleanor, you could never be a burden. You saved my life. Maria stood at the foot of the bed watching quietly. After a few minutes, a nurse came in to check Eleanor's vitals and suggested they let her rest. David kissed Eleanor's forehead gently. I'm coming back tomorrow, he promised, and the day after that, and every day until you wake up and tell me yourself to go away. I'm not disappearing again. Never again. As they left the ICU, David's mind was spinning with questions. Who else had Eleanor helped? Where were they now? Did they know she was here fighting for her life? Did they care? In the elevator, Maria said, You should try to find them. The other people she helped. They deserve to know she's in the hospital. I don't even know who they are. Just first names and letters she never sent. Maybe Gateway House knows. Maybe they keep records. David nodded slowly. That made sense. If Eleanor had volunteered there for 30 years, someone must have known her well. Someone must have seen the people she'd helped, heard the stories. When they got to the parking lot, David's phone rang. It was Patricia, the social worker. Mr. Martinez, I spoke with the director at Gateway House. Her name is Angela, and she knew Mrs. Chen very well. She's going to compile a list of people Eleanor worked with closely. She said there are quite a few who stayed in touch with the shelter even after they got back on their feet. She'll have information for you by tomorrow. Thank you, David said. Thank you so much. That night at home, David couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor's scrapbook and letters spread out in front of him. Sophia came downstairs around midnight, found him there in the dim light. Dad? What's wrong? He looked up at his daughter, now 24 years old, a nurse herself at County Medical. How had time gone so fast? How had he let 40 years slip away without honoring the woman who'd made all of this possible? Come sit down, sweetheart.
I need to tell you about someone.
Someone very important who I should have told you about a long time ago. Sophia sat, and David told her about Eleanor, about being 19 and homeless, about sleeping in his car, about a tiny old woman who'd decided to save a stranger's life. Sophia listened with tears in her eyes. Can I meet her? Sophia asked when he finished. She's in ICU right now. But yes, when she wakes up, I want you to meet her. I want her to know about you, about the granddaughter she's never met but has been tracking in newspaper clippings for 24 years. Sophia picked up one of the letters, read it quietly. She really loved you, Dad, like you were her own son. I know. And I abandoned her.
What kind of person does that?
The kind who was young and scared and didn't know how to handle that much kindness, Sophia said firmly. But you're here now. That's what matters. You came when she needed you. David hoped that was true. He hoped it wasn't too late to make up for 40 years of silence. He hoped Eleanor would wake up and give him the chance to finally say thank you properly. To tell her that every good thing in his life traced back to her kindness on that freezing night in 1984. He gathered up the letters and put them back in their envelopes. Tomorrow he'd go back to the hospital. Tomorrow he'd start finding the other people Eleanor had saved. Tomorrow he'd begin building the family Eleanor deserved. The family she'd secretly created, one broken person at a time. But tonight, he just sat with his daughter and looked at 40 years of love documented in newspaper clippings and unsent letters, evidence that he'd been seen, been remembered, been cherished by someone who'd asked for nothing in return except that he live a good life. And he had lived a good life. Thanks to Eleanor Chen, he'd lived a very good life indeed. Now it was time to make sure she knew it. Time to make sure she understood that her sacrifice hadn't been wasted, that her kindness had rippled out in ways she couldn't imagine. Time to finally come home to the woman who'd given him a home when he had nowhere else to go. David was back at the hospital before sunrise. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with everything he'd learned about Eleanor. The ICU nurse recognized him from the night before and gave him a sympathetic smile. She had a stable night, the nurse said. That's good news at her age. You can sit with her, but she's still heavily sedated. David settled into the chair beside Eleanor's bed and took her hand. It felt so delicate, like tissue paper and bird bones. Hard to believe this was the same hand that had knocked on his car window 40 years ago in the freezing rain. I'm back just like I promised, he said softly, and I'm going to keep coming back. Every single day, the machines beeped their steady rhythm. Eleanor's chest rose and fell. David found himself talking to her, telling her things he should have said decades ago. About his wedding day, how he'd looked for her in the crowd even though he'd never invited her because he'd been too embarrassed. About holding Sophia for the first time and wishing Eleanor could meet her. About the nights he'd driven past her old house, always meaning to stop. Never finding the courage. Around 8 in the morning, Patricia, the social worker, appeared in the doorway with a woman David didn't recognize. She was maybe in her 50s, black, with kind eyes and a warm presence. Mr. Martinez, this is Angela Washington. She's the director of Gateway House. Angela stepped forward and shook David's hand. Eleanor talked about you, she said, and David's eyes went wide. She did? Oh yes, not often and never with much detail. But every once in a while she'd mention this young man she'd helped back in the 80s. She'd wonder how you were doing, if you were happy. She never said your name, always just called you her first. David's throat tightened. Her first. He'd been her first rescue, her first saved soul. That meant something. That meant everything. I brought something for you, Angela said, pulling a folder from her bag. These are people Eleanor worked with closely over the years at Gateway House. People who stayed in touch, who turned their lives around. I thought you might want to contact them. Let them know she's here. David took the folder with shaking hands. Inside were about 15 sheets of paper, each with a name, phone number, and a brief note about how Eleanor had helped them. Tyler Brennan. Former Marine, homeless after struggling with PTSD. Eleanor helped him find housing and connected him with VA services. Now works as a counselor for other veterans. Keisha Williams. Ran away from foster care at 16. Eleanor gave her a safe place to stay and helped her finish high school. Now a social worker herself, Robert Chen. No relation to Eleanor despite the same last name. Lost everything after his wife's medical bills bankrupted him. Eleanor helped him find work and rebuild. Now manages a hardware store. Page after page of lives changed, people saved. David's eyes blurred with tears as he read through them all. "She never told me about any of this," David said. "In her letters she mentioned names, but I had no idea it was so many people." "Eleanor didn't do it for recognition," Angela said. "She did it because she couldn't not do it. After her daughter and husband died, helping others was how she survived. She once told me that every person she helped was a way of honoring their memory." David looked up sharply. "Her daughter? I knew about her husband, but she never mentioned a daughter." Angela's face softened with sadness. "Catherine. She died in the same car accident that killed Eleanor's husband, 1979. Catherine was only 23, just graduated from college. Eleanor doesn't talk about it much, but I think that's why she focused so much on young people in crisis. Every young person she helped was, in some way, the daughter she couldn't save." The weight of that truth settled over David like a blanket. All this time he'd thought Eleanor had helped him out of simple kindness. He'd never imagined the depth of pain she'd been carrying, the loss she'd been trying to heal. "I was her first," David said quietly, 5 years after she lost them. "I was the first person she helped. And you showed her that helping others could give her purpose again," Angela said. "You probably saved her life as much as she saved yours." They sat in silence for a moment, watching Eleanor breathe. Then Patricia spoke up. "Mr. Martinez, these people on this list, they'd want to know Eleanor's here. They'd want a chance to see her, to thank her." David nodded. "Can you help me contact them?" "Already working on it," Angela said. "I've started making calls this morning. Most of them are local. They're all asking if they can visit." "Of course they can. She's their family too." Over the next few hours, David started making calls himself. The first was to Tyler Brennan, the veteran. Tyler answered on the second ring. "This is Tyler. Hi, my name is David Martinez. I'm calling about Eleanor Chen. She's in the hospital and, is she okay?" Tyler's voice was urgent, scared. "What happened?" "She had a heart attack. She's stable now, but it was serious. I thought you'd want to know." There was silence on the other end, then a shaky breath. "Where is she?" "What hospital?" "Mercy General. ICU, 4th floor. I'm coming right now." "Thank you for calling me." "Thank you." The next call was to Keisha Williams. She started crying the moment David explained the situation. "Eleanor saved my life," she sobbed. "I was living on the streets, sleeping in abandoned buildings. She found me and she didn't give up on me even when I kept screwing up. I need to see her." "Please, I need to see her." "Come whenever you want," David said. "She'd want you here." By noon, the ICU waiting room was filling up with people. Tyler arrived first, a tall man in his 40s with military short hair and tattoos on his forearms. He shook David's hand hard. "You're the one she helped in the 80s, aren't you? She mentioned you once. Said you were proof that people could change their whole lives around." "She mentioned me? Just once. We were talking about hope, about whether it was worth it to keep fighting. She told me about a kid who slept in his car and ended up owning his own business. She said if you could do it, I could do it." That story kept me going on some really dark nights. David felt his chest tighten with emotion. His story had helped someone else. Eleanor had used his story to save another life. Keisha arrived next, a young woman in her 30s with braids and a professional suit. She looked successful, confident. Nothing like the runaway teenager she'd once been. When she saw David, she walked straight to him and hugged him like they were old friends. "Eleanor used to tell me about you too," she said. "Whenever I wanted to give up, she'd tell me about the boy who lived in her guest room and studied every night until he got his life together. She said if you could do it, so could I." More people kept arriving. Robert, the hardware store manager, with his quiet dignity and calloused hands. Bethany, who Eleanor had helped escape an abusive relationship, and who now ran a women's shelter. Luis, who'd been addicted to drugs and homeless for years before Eleanor connected him with a treatment program. He'd been clean for 12 years now and worked as an addiction counselor. Each of them had a story. Each of them had been saved by Eleanor Chen. And each of them had thought they were special, unique, the one person Eleanor had chosen to help. Now they stood together in the waiting room and realized they were part of something bigger. They were Eleanor's family, her legacy, her children made from broken pieces. David went into Eleanor's room with Tyler and Keisha. The ICU only allowed 2 visitors at a time, but the nurses bent the rules when they understood what was happening. Eleanor was still unconscious, still breathing with the help of machines, but Tyler held her hand and cried openly. "She never judged me," he said. I came back from deployment all messed up in my head. Couldn't hold a job, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. Everyone else saw a damaged vet. Eleanor saw a person who needed help. She sat with me through panic attacks. She drove me to VA appointments. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Keisha stood on the other side of the bed, tears streaming down her face. I was so angry when I met her. Angry at the world, angry at the system, angry at everyone. I was mean to her at first. Told her I didn't need her help, told her to leave me alone. But she kept showing up. Every day at the shelter, she'd find me and talk to me. Just talk. About books, about life, about anything. She never tried to fix me. She just loved me until I was ready to fix myself. They stayed for about 15 minutes, then stepped out to let others have their turn. Robert went in next with Bethany. Then Luis with a woman named Hannah, who Eleanor had helped get custody of her kids back after years of legal battles. In the waiting room, David sat surrounded by Eleanor's extended family. They shared stories, laughed, cried. It was like a strange reunion for people who'd never met, but had all been shaped by the same incredible woman. Did she ever ask any of you for anything? David asked the group. Like, did she ever need help or want something in return? Everyone shook their heads. Never, Tyler said. I tried to pay her back once. Offered her money after I got my first steady paycheck. She refused. Said the only payment she wanted was for me to help someone else someday. She told me the same thing, Keisha added. Said to pay it forward. Me too, Robert said. She had this saying. Kindness is a circle, not a line. She meant it keeps going, keeps spreading. David pulled out Eleanor's unsent letters from his bag. He'd brought them to the hospital, unable to leave them behind. I found these yesterday. 40 years of letters she wrote to me but never sent. He passed them around and people read them quietly. Many had tears in their eyes. She did the same for me, Bethany said softly. After I left my ex-husband and Eleanor helped me get into the shelter, she wrote me letters. Encouraging words, advice, just checking in. I kept every single one. She wrote to me too, Louise said. When I was in treatment and couldn't have visitors, Eleanor sent letters every week. Told me stories, kept me connected to the outside world. Those letters saved me. David realized something profound. Eleanor hadn't just helped people with housing or jobs or practical things. She'd given them something more important. She'd given them her attention, her time, her heart. She'd made each person feel seen and valued and worth saving. Around 3 p.m, Dr. Patel came to the waiting room. He looked surprised to see so many people there. Are you all here for Mrs. Chen? We're her family, David said simply. And it was true. Not by blood, but by something stronger. By choice, by love. By a shared experience of being saved by an extraordinary woman. Dr. Patel smiled. She's very lucky to have all of you. I have good news. Her vital signs are improving. We're going to start reducing her sedation tomorrow. If everything goes well, she might wake up in the next day or two. The waiting room erupted in relieved chatter. People hugged, cried happy tears. David felt a weight lift from his chest. She was going to make it. Eleanor was going to wake up and see what she'd built. This family of rescued souls who'd all come back to thank her. That evening, after most people had gone home with promises to return tomorrow, David sat alone in Eleanor's room. Maria had brought Sophia to meet everyone, and his daughter had been deeply moved by all the stories. Now they'd gone home to rest, but David couldn't leave. Not yet. He pulled out one more letter from the stack, one he hadn't read yet. It was dated just 6 months ago, the most recent one. Dear David, I'm getting old. Really old now. My body is wearing out and I know I don't have much time left. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Wondering if you're happy, if life has been kind to you. I hope it has. I updated my emergency contact information today and put your name down. I don't know if you'll come if something happens to me. Maybe you've forgotten about me. Maybe you've moved on completely and that's okay. That's what I wanted for you. But if you do come, if you're reading this letter somehow, I want you to know something. You saved me as much as I saved you. After I lost Catherine and my husband, I wanted to die. I had no reason to keep living. Then I met you, the scared young man sleeping in his car, and suddenly I had a purpose again. You gave me back my life, David. You showed me that I could still matter, still make a difference. Thank you for that. Thank you for letting me help you. It was the greatest gift I ever received. With all my love, Eleanor. David's tears fell onto the paper, smudging Eleanor's careful handwriting. She'd been saying goodbye in that letter. She'd known her time was running out, and she'd wanted him to know that he'd mattered to her, that he'd saved her too. He folded the letter carefully and put it back with the others. Then he took Eleanor's hand again. "I'm here," he whispered. "And I'm not alone. Your whole family is here, Eleanor. All of us, everyone you saved. We're all here waiting for you to wake up so we can tell you what you meant to us, so we can finally say thank you properly. So please wake up. Please come back to us. We need you. I need you." The machines beeped their steady rhythm. Eleanor's hand was warm in his. And somewhere in the depths of her medicated sleep, David liked to think she heard him. He liked to think she knew she wasn't alone anymore, that the family she'd built one broken person at a time had finally come together, and they were all here for her, just like she'd always been there for them. On the third day after the surgery, Eleanor opened her eyes. David was sitting beside her bed reading one of her unsent letters out loud when he noticed her fingers twitch. Then her eyelids fluttered. Then those sharp, intelligent eyes he remembered so well were looking right at him. "David," she whispered, her voice scratchy and weak, but unmistakably hers. He nearly fell out of his chair. "Eleanor, oh my God, you're awake. Let me get the nurse." But her hand gripped his with surprising strength. "Wait, stay." So he stayed, holding her hand, his heart pounding with relief and joy. The nurse came in anyway, having seen Eleanor's vitals change on the monitor. She checked everything, asked Eleanor some questions to make sure her mind was clear. "What year is it? Who's the president? Can you tell me your name?" Eleanor answered everything correctly, though her voice was barely above a whisper. The nurse smiled and said she'd notify Dr. Patel right away. When they were alone again, Eleanor looked at David with those eyes that still saw everything despite her body's frailty. "You came," she said, "after all these years. You came. Of course I came. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I never visited, never called. I thought you'd forgotten about me, moved on with your life." A small smile crossed her pale face. "I could never forget you. You were my first, I know. Angela told me. About your daughter, Catherine. About your husband. I'm so sorry. I never knew." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "It was a long time ago. But yes, losing them broke something in me. I didn't want to live anymore. Then I saw you in that parking lot, sleeping in your car, and something woke up inside me. A purpose. A reason to keep going. You saved my life," David said, his voice breaking. "And you saved mine," Eleanor replied. "We saved each other." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, 40 years of unspoken words hanging in the air between them. "I found the scrapbook," David said finally. "And the letters. All those letters you never sent. Why didn't you reach out? I would have come." "I would have been there." Eleanor took a shaky breath. "Because you needed to be free. You needed to build your life without feeling obligated to an old woman who helped you once. I wanted you to fly, David, not look back, but I did look back. All the time. I drove past your old house dozens of times. I thought about you constantly. I just convinced myself you didn't need me bothering you. We were both fools then," Eleanor said with a weak laugh that turned into a cough. David helped her take a sip of water through a straw. When she'd recovered, she looked at him curiously. "Tell me about your life. Are you happy?" So he did. He told her about Maria, about their 36 years of marriage, about Sophia, who was a nurse now, helping people just like Eleanor had helped him, about his auto shop, his friends, his life. Eleanor listened with tears rolling down her cheeks. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered when he finished. "So very proud." "There's something else," David said. "You're not going to believe this, but there are people here. People you helped over the years. They've been waiting for you to wake up." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Who?" "Tyler, Keisha, Robert, Bethany, Luis, Hannah. So many others. Angela from Gateway House called them. They all came, Eleanor. Your whole family is here." Eleanor started crying harder now, overwhelmed. "I never expected them to come. I never asked for anything. That's exactly why they came. Because you never asked. Because you gave everything and expected nothing. They love you, Eleanor. We all love you." Over the next hour, Dr. Patel came in to examine Eleanor. He was amazed by her recovery, called it remarkable for someone her age. He said she'd need extensive rehabilitation and recovery time, but if she continued improving like this, she could eventually go home. That's when Patricia, the social worker, appeared with bad news. Eleanor's apartment building was being demolished in 2 weeks. The owners had sold the property to developers. Eleanor would need somewhere else to live, but at her age and with her current medical needs, finding housing would be difficult. How much time do I have? Eleanor asked, her voice tired. 2 weeks to clear out your apartment. But Mrs. Chen, you can't live alone anymore. You'll need assistance, maybe a care facility. Those places have long waiting lists and significant costs. Eleanor closed her eyes. I don't have family to help, and I don't have much money saved. David spoke up before he even fully thought it through. You'll live with me. Everyone turned to look at him. Eleanor's eyes flew open. David, no. I can't ask that of you. You're not asking. I'm offering. We have a guest room on the ground floor. Maria already said she'd love to have you. Sophia's excited to meet you. You're not going to some facility, Eleanor. You're coming home with me. Eleanor shook her head weakly. I won't be a burden to you. A burden? Eleanor, you gave me a home when I had nothing. You asked for nothing in return. Now I'm returning the favor. And before you argue, know that Maria and Sophia will both come in here and tell you the same thing. Your family. Family doesn't leave family in a nursing home when there's room at the table. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Just say yes. Yes, Eleanor whispered. Thank you. Patricia looked relieved. That solves one problem. Now we just need to coordinate the move and get her apartment cleared out. I'll handle it, David said. Just tell me when and where. Later that day, David brought Tyler, Keisha, and Robert in to see Eleanor. The moment they walked into the room, Eleanor started crying all over again. Tyler, this tough veteran who'd survived war and homelessness, broke down the moment he saw her awake. Hey, Eleanor, he said, his voice shaking. You scared us pretty good. I'm sorry, Eleanor said, reaching for his hand. I didn't mean to worry anyone. Keisha sat on the other side of the bed, crying and laughing at the same time. You can't leave us yet. We need you too much. Look at you, Eleanor said to Keisha. So beautiful and strong. I knew you'd be something special. Only because you believed in me first, Keisha replied. Robert stood at the foot of the bed, this quiet man who'd lost everything and rebuilt his life with Eleanor's help. You're a stubborn old woman, he said with affection, fighting through heart surgery at 107. Most people half your age wouldn't make it. I had reasons to live, Eleanor said, looking around at all of them. Good reasons. Over the next few days, Eleanor's room became a constant stream of visitors. Bethany brought flowers. Luis brought pictures of his kids, wanting Eleanor to see how well they were doing. Hannah brought a photo album of her children's school achievements. Each person came to say thank you, to show Eleanor what her kindness had grown into, and each time Eleanor cried. She'd never expected gratitude. She'd helped people because she needed to, because it gave her life meaning after losing Catherine and her husband. She'd never imagined they'd all come back, that they'd remember her, that they'd care. David watched it all and realized something beautiful was happening. Eleanor had spent 40 years building a family without even knowing it. She'd taken broken people and given them hope, and now those people had become successful, kind, generous humans who wanted to honor the woman who'd saved them. One afternoon, Tyler pulled David aside in the waiting room. We've been talking, all of us, about what to do for Eleanor. She gave us everything and we want to give something back. What did you have in mind?